Welcome to WiseTake.com. This is CK013. You can find me on Twitter at CK_013. And yes, we are bringing you another NBA DFS podcast. It is Friday, February 3rd, 2017. We've got an awesome nine-game slate going today. A quick disclaimer, this is my second time recording the podcast. I released it earlier, and then I realized that I had mentioned Adams was playing the Bulls. I don't know why I did that. I spoke about Harden and Butler. I spoke about all that, and somehow I threw into the mix Adams was playing the Bulls, which he's not. Obviously, he's playing the Grizzlies. So I decided that wasn't good enough for me, and it certainly wasn't good enough for you guys. So I decided to just re-record the podcast and go over it again. So first off, last night's four-game slate wasn't as bad as it looked on paper. I mean, some of the games stayed a lot closer. We had a huge upset, obviously, with Atlanta. Tim Hardaway had a monster game. What's up with Bazemore? If you guys saw the clip of Hardaway getting interviewed post-game, this is like his big epic game for him, and Bazemore's doing that weird look again where, I can't even do it. He just kind of, I don't know. He was doing that again, and it was as bad as it is. Like, I see it and he looks so creepy and it looks horrible. But for some reason, when he's doing it, I can't help but just watch him do it and just I don't know. But anyway, last night wasn't so bad. Harden was obviously phenomenal again. But we're gonna start off today by talking about some key injury news, and we have a lot. We're gonna start off with DeRozan. DeRozan is questionable with an ankle. Rodney Stuckey is expected to miss. Cantor is obviously still out. Julius Randle is questionable with pneumonia, but he only played. He didn't play very much yesterday. Avery Bradley is questionable with an Achilles. Kelly Olynyk is questionable with a shoulder. Danilo Gallinari is doubtful with a groin. Nikola Jokic is questionable with a hip. Will Barton is doubtful with an ankle. Andrew Bogut is expected to miss with a hamstring. D. Will is expected to be out with that toe. JJ Barea is still out. Ed Davis is questionable with a wrist. Jared Dudley is questionable with illness. Temple and Caspi are expected to be out. So that stuff is all important, and we're going to talk about why as we go through the positions. We're going to go position by position, starting with the point guard. Obviously, we have Westbrook. Westbrook is certainly a contrarian play today. I don't think people are going to be dying to play him, especially on a 9-game slate where there's so many options. He's 12-1 on FanDuel. He's only 11-5 on DraftKings. So on DraftKings, you kind of have to consider him. One, I think his ownership will be lower than usual. And I always talk about when you get a chance to have a guy like Westbrook or Harden lower owned than usual, you usually want to have at least a little bit of exposure. And at 11-5 on DraftKings, he almost projects to surpass that salary already. Granted, the matchup's not really factored into that, and it's a tougher matchup against a slow-paced Memphis team. But he is home, and that's the thing. Westbrook likes to play fast, and Memphis tries their best to not let you. So it'll be interesting, but I definitely think Westbrook has to be considered, even though the matchup might not be ideal. IT2 certainly in play. 10-5 on FanDuel, 10K on DraftKings against the Lakers. You do have some blowout concern. The Lakers playing on the back end of a back-to-back. Their second game on the East Coast. And obviously, I think that whether or not how good of a play IT2 is going to depend on whether Bradley plays or not. If Bradley is in, it's going to lower his cash value. However, in GPPs, I think it'll give him a boost because I think his ownership will be a little lower if Bradley plays. And it makes sense because people are going to figure, oh, he's not going to get the usage. However, if you're going to take a shot on that, what you're hoping for is Bradley's a little rusty and Isaiah still has to be the one to carry the team, which would not be too hard to believe considering Bradley's been out for a little while now. Giannis, I just wanted to mention, on DraftKings, he's point guard, and he's also small forward eligible again. He got small forward eligibility back. But we'll talk about him with the shooting guards because on FanDuel, he's only a shooting guard. Lowry at 9.6K on FanDuel, 8.9 on DraftKings. Good matchup against Orlando. It's not the best matchup, and this might be a game. This is probably a game that doesn't appear too attractive. Orlando is one of the slower-paced teams in the league, although lately they have been playing at a faster pace. And then you have Toronto. Now, obviously, the big news we're waiting for is DeRozan. If DeRozan plays, I think that in cash games, you don't have to necessarily lock Lowry in. If DeRozan is out, you kind of have to go back to considering hitting the lock button with Lowry as far as cash games go. Now, again, similar situation to IT2. If DeRozan plays, I think Lowry becomes a better GPP play. Maybe not as good as, he obviously gets a downgrade as far as cash goes, but in GPPs, he gets a boost because his ownership should be lower because people are going to figure DeRozan's back, his usage is going to drop. I got news for you. Lowry's usage is still incredibly high with or without DeRozan. He's still a good play. So he's worth considering. Eric Bledsoe, I'll mention him because of his price. 9.5 on FanDuel and 8.8 on DraftKings. That's a big difference. And he's in a pace down spot on the road against a Kings team that is a little rested. So if you want to take a shot, you can. I think there's too many other better options on both sites. So I don't think I'll be going there. But if you want to consider him, I mean, the guy's been red hot lately. Jeff Teague is in a phenomenal spot. But every Indiana Pacer is in a phenomenal spot against Brooklyn. Anybody who plays Brooklyn is in a phenomenal spot. Even the bench guys are in a phenomenal spot. So Teague at 7.6 on FanDuel, 7.5 on DraftKings. Certainly in a great spot. I'm not going to spend too much time just because that's all there is. Who's going to stop him? Elf, Reggie, Rubio, D'Angelo Russell, they're all in play in that mid-tier options. So there's a lot of options at point guard. It's pretty deep today. One of the guys I like, a couple guys I like for value. Obviously, Yogi, we'll talk about him because he's obviously going, people know about him a lot. They've been playing him a lot lately. Yogi is 4.9 on FanDuel. He's 5.1 on DraftKings. I'm not crazy about that price increase. I do like his matchup against Portland. Portland is not very good against guards in general. And Dallas is in a pace-up spot here in Portland. And 4.9 on FanDuel is fine. The 5.1 on DraftKings makes me a little nervous. But I think this is a situation where people may get off. I don't know for sure, but I'm definitely going to have to consider him. He will be in my player pool just for the fact that we always say minutes equals money, especially in cash. And we know Yogi's going to get the minutes. So I think he's definitely viable today. How much, I don't know. It's going to depend on if any other value opens up. There could be something that opens up better that's cheaper that's going to get the same minutes, and I'd rather play that in that case. The other guy I like for value that I think is interesting is Brogdon. Malcolm Brogdon is 4.9 on FanDuel, same price as Yogi. So on FanDuel, he's an interesting pivot, and he's 4.7 on DraftKings, which I think is a great value considering lately he's been playing those 30 minutes again, and he's got a matchup against Denver, and whether Moutier plays or not, Denver's horrible against point guards. So I think that Brogdon is actually in a pretty good spot, and a 4.7 on DraftKings, I'm going to have to really consider him, unless, like I said, I find something else that's a little better. Moving on to shooting guard, Harden is 12.2 on FanDuel, 12.5 on DraftKings. He's in a great spot against Chicago. Now, great spot. He's at home, and he's on a back-to-back. But we've seen that back-to-backs don't seem to really bother Harden too much. In fact, we've seen him have better performances on the back end of a back-to-back at times. So I think Harden is certainly in play. He's always in play. I'm never going to tell you to completely fade the guy. But yeah, what else is there to say? It's Harden. Concerns, a little concern. They may put Butler on him if he gets out of control. Butler's obviously a better defender. But even this year, Butler hasn't been playing as hard a defense as I think that we've seen in the past. So I think he's in a great spot. Little only concern, it's a pace down spot. But definitely still like him. Let's see. Giannis at 10.9 on FanDuel, 10.3 on DraftKings. I think Giannis is certainly in a phenomenal spot against Denver. I don't see who's going to stop him on that team, especially if Jokic is out. If Jokic is out, there's really nobody to stop him from driving to that rim. So I think Giannis is a great play. If Jokic plays, I think Giannis is still a good play. But I think he's obviously a better play with Jokic out, just because I know Giannis likes to take it to the hole a lot. And Jokic is one of their better rim protectors. So definitely like Giannis. DeRozan, I'll talk about. He's 8.9 on FanDuel, 7.7 on DraftKings. I like his price on DraftKings, but I don't want to play a guy who, one, has had injury issues, and two, is coming back after missing a couple of games. I don't typically like to play him on his first game back. McCollum is a guy I'd much rather play. 7.8 on FanDuel, 7.2 on DraftKings. I think his ownership will be a little low because there are some options today at shooting guard that are appealing, and I think that Dallas struggles against two guards specifically, guards in general with D. Will out, but two guards specifically. So you're going to see Seth Curry probably cover McCollum most of the time. I think that's a big matchup issue, and even if Seth Curry is not the one covering him, then who's it going to be? Yogi? So I think McCollum is in a sneaky good spot here, considering he's in a pace-down spot. Dwayne Wade is also interesting. You could certainly give it a shot. He's in a pace-up spot. You know, Westbrook's going to try to push it, so there should be some opportunities for Wade. I'm not concerned about Oladipo defense, so he's certainly an option. The guy I think that will probably be the chalk, the guy I think is in the best spot on paper is probably Booker. Devin Booker is 6.9 on FanDuel. He's 6.8 on DraftKings, and I think he is what else you want to say? The Kings are horrible against shooting guards. They're horrible against shooting guards. And Booker's been playing phenomenal lately. He's been chucking. He's been just taking so many shots. So it's very hard to pass up with Booker. He might be a guy that I have to rely on in cash games. But, again, I don't know for sure. We'll see. But I do think Booker's he's in kind of the obvious good spot play. Lou Will is interesting. It's 6.4 on FanDuel. It's too high. But on 5.8 on DraftKings, If this game gets out of hand, maybe they'll give him some run. I don't know, but worth mentioning. Seth Curry is obviously in another great spot. He's 6.3 on FanDuel. He's 5.8 on DraftKings. And he's in a great spot because they have no choice. They have to play this guy. They have to play him at the 2. They have to play him at the 1. They have no choice. So anytime you're in a situation like that, you know you're going to get 30 to 40 minutes out, 35 to 40 minutes. I mean, it's tough to fade a guy, especially in cash, in that kind of position, even if his price is rising up. Now, once D. Will comes back and once, Barea comes back and things like that, then yeah, sure, there's certainly merit in fading Curry. But in a spot like this where they're kind of relying on him for so much, it's tough to get away with fading him. But you can in tournaments by all means. Real quick, that's it for the shooting guards. I just wanted to mention on FanDuel, Karis LeVert was moved to shooting guard. So if you didn't like playing him at small forward, check him out as a shooting guard. He's obviously it'd be a very good punt option. He's super cheap, but it was worth just wanted to mention that he's now moved to shooting guard. Moving on to small forward, Jimmy Butler's in a great spot against Houston. He should see a lot of opportunities in this pace-up spot. I don't see a world in which they're able to contain Butler himself. I mean, they're going to have Ariza on him. Ariza is one of the best defenders on the Rockets, but as you can see by their overall statistics, that's not saying too much for that team. D'Antoni is obviously offensive-driven, so I don't think he'll have a successful game plan to contain a guy like Butler. And I don't know how popular Butler's going to be. I would imagine he's going to be popular just because of that matchup with Houston. Teams like to target Houston and play teams against Houston, stack their games, etc. But he's still, you got to consider him. 9.4 on FanDuel, 9K on DraftKings. Certainly got to consider him. Paul George, 8.7 on FanDuel, 8.1 on DraftKings. That's the guy that I figured will be the chalkiest, and rightfully so. He's in a phenomenal matchup here. So I would imagine that he's a little chalk, but I can't tell you not to play him against Brooklyn. I can't tell you not to play anybody against Brooklyn. I will say, again, my concern with this game is that they're all in such good spots that any one of these guys can go off. Thad Young is in a revenge spot. He could go off. Teague's Brooklyn's horrible against point guards. He could go off. Paul George obviously can go off. They're terrible against small forwards. So anybody in this game could go off. Miles Turner. So that's my question, is it may not be so easy. Now, I guess in cash, if you wanted to just make quick, easy lineups, you could just kind of game stack this game, or at least stack the Indiana side. You could play Teague, George, and Turner if that's what you want to do. I don't see in a world where all three of them are going to bust. Maybe one bust, but it would probably be more for injury, or maybe he just didn't excel past about. I think that they'll at least hit their value. But anyway, I'm spending way too much time talking about that team. Andrew Wiggins, 7.3 on FanDuel, 7K on DraftKings. Wiggins is Detroit. Okay, yeah. So this game, sorry, I had to find the game. I forgot who he was playing for a second there. This game is interesting. I don't think it's going to be too popular, and it's because, rightfully so, two of these teams are two of the slower paced teams in the league. But if you look at the total, I was very surprised to see how high that total is. I think it's around 211. I thought that was pretty high considering both of these teams are slower paced. But if that's the case, if that's what Vegas thinks, that would make this game perfectly fine to target. And I think Wiggins is a guy you can certainly go to. He's obviously got the defensive presence, and he'd have Markieff Morris on him, or I'm sorry, Marcus Morris on him. I wouldn't be too concerned about that. So I think Wiggins is definitely interesting as a mid-tier option. And a guy like him is typically good in cash because he's going to get run. Thibodeau is going to play this guy. He's going to play him minutes, and that's the bottom line. Barnes, I think, is another great cash play. 6.6 on FanDuel, 6.2 on DraftKings. Now, in a situation where Dirk is out, you lock him in on cash games, and that you don't even think about it. But when Dirk is playing, you still consider him. So I think he's definitely considerable. But if for any reason, not that I've heard anything, I don't think that Dirk is going to be out. But if for any reason Dirk misses for rest or he's sick or whatever, Barnes becomes an automatic cash play at that point because he's the only guy that they really rely on truly and heavily for ISO production. So definitely in play. Crowder, 6.5 on FanDuel, 6.2 on DraftKings. You can put him in cash, but with Horford back and Bradley might be back, I'm probably not going to play the guy. The guy I think is interesting is Wilson Chandler. So Gallinari is expected to be out. Now, if Jokic plays, Wilson Chandler will still see a lot of run. They're going to need him at the 3, at the 4. He's still going to see a lot of run. But if Jokic doesn't play, so my point is if Jokic plays, he's still okay. If Jokic doesn't play, they are going to rely heavily, not by choice, but they're going to have to rely heavily on Wilson Chandler, and that's because Barton is out. So Barton is pretty much their off the bench guy, kind of takes over and scores your points. He usually plays with Chandler, so he's out. So now Chandler's in the starting lineup. Gallo's out. So you pretty much Harris and Barton are going to see a ridiculous amount of minutes. At least you would think, right? And Fareed should see minutes. If Jokic is out, Fareed should see those minutes as well. So those guys are all interesting, and that's why it's so important to see whether Jokic plays. It's not just about can I play Jokic. It's about who does that affect on his team. So if Jokic is out, Chandler will be in my cash game for sure, and he'll probably be in a lot of my GPPs. We've seen what he's capable of with Gallo out. It's just back then, Jokic wasn't really a big part of the offense, so we don't know how much Jokic, if he plays, how much that'll impact that. So definitely, Wilson Chandler is certainly an interesting option. I like him a lot, and I may like him that much more if I find out Jokic is out. If Jokic does play, I do still like him, but probably not as much. Speaking of which, going back to shooting guard, I meant to talk about Gary Harris. Gary Harris is 5.1 on FanDuel, 4.7 on DraftKings. Great price on DraftKings. This guy's going to play. And if Jokic plays or not, I still like him. If Jokic plays, I like Harris a little bit more because they do have a little bit of that correlation where Harris likes to cut to the basket, Jokic hits him the assist. So that's an option. But at 4.7 on DraftKings, he might make my cash games without Barton. Without Gallo, they may need to rely on Gary Harris a little bit more than they're probably used to or more comfortable with. So just wanted to mention that. Going back to small forward, the last guy I wanted to talk about just as a value punt option is TJ Warren at 4K. So they're playing the Kings. It's a pace down spot. However, the way I've noticed the rotation with the Suns, if they're playing a team with a very good offensive small forward, they'll typically give PJ Tucker the run because he's a better defender. If they're playing a team that has no threat at the small forward position, in my opinion, they seem to give Warren a little bit more of a run, and they seem to take advantage of those positions. So this is a situation where Rudy Gay's out. There's a lot of injuries to that Brooklyn, the 2, 3s, and 4s. Are a lot of injuries going on. Boogie is pretty much their only guy, and then Collison is those are their two consistent guys. So in this situation, who's going to cover Warren? I guess Barnes, and I'm not really too afraid of that. So I think Warren's an interesting punt play. I'm not telling you to hit the lock button on him or anything. I'm just saying if you're looking for a guy that's cheap at small forward, he's the value guy that I thought was worth mentioning. So just consider him. Moving on to the power forward position. Jokic is obviously the obvious guy at 10-3 on FanDuel, 9-3 on DraftKings. So we'll talk about Jokic for a little bit here. First, you have to see if he's going to play. Second, and I know he was taking some shots the other day in LA, so I think he's close. The second thing, how much will he play? Are they going to try to put a limit on this guy? With young big men, the league has to be a little cautious. We saw how cautious the Knicks were with Porzingis, and you see when Porzingis came back, he was rusty. I'm not comparing Porzingis to Jokic. No. All I'm saying is you got to be mindful. Pay attention. See whatever you can find. Follow the Denver Nuggets beat writers and see if you get any indication if he does play, if there's going to be a minutes limit, and if there is, what that will be. Because I think that does it. Minutes is money, and it's going to affect when he's that expensive. It's got to factor into your pricing, especially on a slate where power forward is pretty ugly. So now on DraftKings he's center, and that's it. So he's not really in the mix. But on FanDuel, where you have to play two power forwards, this slate is ugly. So I would imagine it's going to be tough getting around Jokic. But if he's not going to get full run at that price, you could probably get away with maybe playing a Boogie or something like that at your paying up for a guy like Boogie or even Butler or Westbrook or Harden or any one of those guys. But you can't do that if you're going to play Jokic at power forward. You're going to have to pick one, unless you can find enough scrubs, maybe two. But if you're going to play Jokic, you only get one other guy, right? So you have to make sure that Jokic is the guy you want. That's all I'm saying. Anyway, he's great. He's phenomenal. I love watching him play. I think it's a phenomenal matchup against Milwaukee, but it's going to impede a lot. And we'll talk about Fareed while we're talking about Jokic because they're both power forwards. It affects Fareed greatly because if Jokic plays, they don't need Fareed as much. Now, Fareed should still see run here because Gallinari's out. I would imagine, and Barton's out. They're going to have to play Wilson Chandler at the 3 most of the time. So when Jokic is in, they're going to need a power forward, and they'll probably either go with Darrell Arthur or Kenneth Fareed. The problem with it is you don't know for sure what they're going to do, especially with the Nuggets. It's really hard to figure that team out. It feels like they're constantly changing things up, and you never really know what they're actually going to do. But those are things you got to consider, and that's why it's important to pay attention to these injury adjustments and injury news. It's extremely important. Moving on, Jabari Parker, 7.4 on FanDuel, 7.3 on DraftKings. I think he's in a phenomenal matchup here. If Jokic plays or not, it doesn't concern me too much. And the reason is because Jabari is a guy that I think doesn't need to necessarily drive to the hoop. Now, listen, if Jokic is out, that's more rebound upside for a guy like Jabari. But if Jokic is in, you kind of take that away. But he's interesting, and I don't know how popular he's going to be. I would imagine he's going to be pretty popular just because, like I said, power forward is pretty ugly today. But I think he's interesting. I definitely think he's interesting. I'd love to give you some more information on the situation, but there's not much else to discuss. You guys know Jabari, you know his game. So, and if you don't, watch some YouTube and figure out what his game is. But I think he's in a pace-up spot, and him and Giannis are certainly pretty good plays in my opinion on paper. On paper, I got to clarify that, on paper. Julius Randle, 6.3 on FanDuel, 6K on DraftKings. It's a shame he's sick for multiple reasons, obviously for himself, but also because this would have been a phenomenal spot for him. I really, really would have loved this spot for Randle. I don't think he's going to play, and even if he plays, I don't know how many minutes he played last night, but I know through the entire first half or maybe even 3/4, he played 5 minutes. So obviously he's got pneumonia, dude. It's not like he's got a flu. I mean, the guy's got pneumonia, man. It's like, I can't even believe he tried to play. I'll give him props for just trying to play. If you played Randle last night and you got burned by him, do not be upset, because number one, you should not have played him because of the fact that he had a lot of risk. And number two, the guy tried. He tried to go out there so that fans could watch him play. He tried to go out there so his team has a chance to win. He tried to go out there so that us DFS players who played him had a shot to win a contest. He tried. The dude has pneumonia. I'm sorry, but if you come at me with a broken leg and you're saying you're going to try to play, that's great. Good for you. I'm not going to play you in my roster. You have a broken leg. It's the same concept. The dude has pneumonia. This isn't like the flu game, Even the flu was hard enough. Everybody's seen Jordan's flu game, so they're all thinking. And then Curry was sick the other night, came back the next day and had a monster game. Don't always work like that, first of all. And second of all, this is not the flu. This is pneumonia. This is way different. So anyway, that's my quick Randle rant. But yeah, it's a shame he's not playing. Well, it's a shame he's sick, because even if he is playing, I can't play him. I mean, you can if you want. Be my guest. Maybe he feels a little better on the second day. I just thought yesterday was like an obvious you can't touch him spot. Anyway, Anderson certainly in play. Ryan Anderson, that is, on Houston. 5.4 on FanDuel, 5.4 on DraftKings. And to be honest with you, I'm mainly mentioning him. One, I don't think Gibson is going to do that great getting out to the three-point line. So if Anderson is hitting, if he's hitting, and that's the thing, if he's not hitting his shots, he's worthless. If he's hitting his shots, he's got massive upside. So that's the risk you take with a guy like Anderson. But again, power forward is pretty ugly. Montrezl Harrell, I'm going to talk about him only because he's power forward eligible on FanDuel. So you can't play him at center. He's 4-4 on FanDuel. So on DraftKings, it's tough to play a guy like him tonight with so many good centers. But we'll talk about the power forward. Power forward's ugly. So if you could play him on power forward at FanDuel at 4.4K, he's worth considering. Capella started yesterday, so he might start today. We'll see. But he still gets decent minutes typically, and he has a great matchup against Chicago with Rolo. I'm not too concerned about Rolo down there. So I think he's certainly interesting. But again, in my opinion, that's more of a FanDuel-only kind of play. Now we're going to get to center, and center is fairly deep today, in my opinion. It really is, and especially the mid-tier. There's a lot of loaded options you can go with. We're going to start off with the obvious stud at center, which is Boogie Cousins. Boogie is 11-3 on FanDuel. He's 10-9 on DraftKings. He's got a fantastic pace-up matchup at home against Phoenix. Why not to play Boogie, right? I mean, the matchup is phenomenal, so why not play Boogie? I don't know, and I'm going to certainly have some exposure to Boogie because I think this is a situation where his floor is probably around 45, maybe 50. So I think he'll have he has massive upside. We know that. Are there reasons to be concerned? Yeah. Number one, well, hold on. First of all, throw that Houston game out. That was a scheduled loss. That was just a nightmare matchup. That was a nightmare spot. The matchup itself was good. Don't get me wrong. It was the timing. They just played Embiid and the Sixers in a crazy game the night before, flew down, and that wasn't even supposed to happen. That was a makeup game for a game that was canceled earlier in the season. And then they went all the way to Houston, the same night after that game, and they were expected to show up. It was like a 4-5. That was just a tough situation. Boogie has had a day or two off now, so he's a little rested. My concern is not the rest. My concern is how many times have we seen these teams take these long road trips or whatever the case is, like distance-wise, and then come back in their first game back home, just completely crap the bed. We've seen it happen all the time. And for those of you that are in maybe the sports betting world who don't play fantasy, you know what I'm talking about because you've probably been burned by that several times. It's a great letdown spot. I'm not saying Boogie's going to let down. I'm just saying there is. I'm not going to hit the lock button on Boogie. I'm going to play Boogie, and I'm going to play Boogie a lot. But I'm not going to lock him into every lineup, and that's the only reason you have to be concerned about the letdown game. With that said, I don't see how Boogie does let anybody down. Maybe the team won't win. Maybe the team in general lets down. But how does Boogie not let down? The guy's usage is through the roof. And there's really no, I mean, Tyson Chandler's a decent rim protector, or at least he used to be. He's getting a little older. He lost a step, and he ain't covering Boogie from the three. He's not. And who's going to stop Boogie's teammates from scoring? Not that there's anybody from on the Kings to really score aside from him, but I think Boogie's in a phenomenal spot. I gave you the disclaimer of what could go wrong, and now I'm telling you, I think on paper, and I'm sure everybody looks at this and thinks the same thing, on paper, Boogie's in a great spot. Cat is also in a great position. Karl-Anthony Towns, 10-8 on FanDuel, 9.9 on DraftKings. He's got a matchup at Detroit, but again, that total is higher than I would have expected for two teams that are a little lower in pace, 2-11. So I think that Drummond is not a very good defender. He ain't covering Cat from the perimeter. So if Cat's shot is on, he could be a phenomenal play. Phenomenal. There is some risk, obviously, even with Cat. Sometimes Wiggins will be the one to go off. Sometimes Levine goes off. I'm not too worried about that today. I think Cat's going to be the guy in this game. It's just he's kind of priced in that, like, he's cheaper than Boogie, but he's more expensive than other guys that are in good spots. So I think his ownership will also be lower, but there's risk. Everybody can have a bad day. If his shot ain't on, then but I think Cat's a phenomenal play. I really do. I don't think his ownership would be too high, especially on DraftKings. 9.9. I think he's in a great spot. Andre Drummond, 8.5 on FanDuel, 7.9 on DraftKings. He's also in a good spot. Karl-Anthony Towns is one of the best offensive centers in the league. He's one of the worst defensive centers, at least this season. Drummond has immense upside, and he's priced in that mid-tier, on DraftKings at least, 7.9. Under 8K for a guy with what, 50, 60 point upside. I definitely think Drummond is interesting. Horford, 7.4 on FanDuel, 6.8 on DraftKings. He's interesting today. Vooch is in an interesting spot. The Plum Dog in a pretty good spot with Bogut out. Even Brolo. Now, let me talk about Brolo real quick. The other day against the Knicks, Brolo was heavy chalk. And the only time that I like playing Brolo because a lot of people don't like him. A chalky Brolo is bad news. If you see Brolo is chalk, run away. Do not play it. Do not play it. Now, listen, I had a little bit of exposure. That was because I like the game in general. But my exposure was very minimal. I tried my best to pivot off. And listen, I didn't do great. I didn't do too great in that game. I did okay that night, but I didn't do too great in that game. I pivoted to guys like Kilpatrick, Karis LeVert. So, I tried to find other guys that would keep up in the game that weren't not Lopez. When he's chalked, there's a problem. The reason he's always cheap from time to time is because people don't play him. And when people don't play him, he does well. But the minute a guy like him this is a center who's tall, who's big, but is not aggressive. And he's not physical. And he's not going to get you rebounds. He's not going to get you too many assists. It's all about his shooting. You're relying too much on. I hate playing players regularly I hate playing chalky players who rely solely on scoring. It's tough because if they're not, you're basically risking, if they're not having a good night, you're done. Whereas if guys get peripherals, maybe he's not scoring, but maybe he can get a double-double with assists and rebounds. That's a possibility. But with a guy that's scoring dependent like Brolo, the chances of him getting a double-double are tougher. So with that said, I think Brolo's in an interesting bounce-back spot today for sure. I definitely think he's in an interesting bounce-back. I don't think people are going to be on him. So he's interesting. Miles Turner in a phenomenal spot. We talked about him already. Let me see. Adams got a tough matchup against Gasol, but they're going to have to use him. So minutes-wise, he's going to get some serious run. And the last guy I want to talk about at center is Jonas Valanciunas. Yeah, I know he burned a lot of people, but listen, you got to have short-term memory. I say it all the time. If DeRozan is out, Valanciunas does actually have a slight usage bump. It's kind of like a carryover, a trickle down from Lowry. So if DeRozan is out, Valanciunas is in a phenomenal matchup against Orlando. Orlando is one of the worst teams DVP against centers. And Valanciunas just broke everybody's heart last time he played. I think he did it so bad. He had probably the worst game of his year, probably. And listen, that happens sometimes. But when that happens, when somebody hits a low like that, remember the law of averages. Eventually, if his average is up here and he just played down here, it's going to balance out eventually. So what does that mean? Maybe we'll see a massive game from him today. I don't know. We'll see. Maybe. If I'm right, shout me out on Twitter. If I'm wrong, I never said it, right? No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, I think he's interesting. And he's the last guy I'm going to mention. He's 5.6 on FanDuel, 5.4 on DraftKings. So that's going to do it for our position-by-position breakdown. Now, this is our last show of the week. The show only goes Monday through Friday. We are off Saturday and Sunday, so good luck over the weekend. Have fun. Be safe. The weekend, spend some time with your family. That's what I'm going to be doing over the weekend. That's what I like to do. That's why I don't do the podcast on Saturdays and Sundays. The projections will be updated on Saturdays and Sundays as long as the slate, if it's a 2-game slate, it's not going to be updated. If it's a 4-game slate or higher, yeah, I'll make sure it's updated in the morning. But again, this is my second version of the podcast. If you watched the first one, I apologize for the mix-up with the notes. But hey, I think this one actually probably came off a little better and was probably a little more helpful. So I appreciate all you guys for watching. If you're watching on YouTube, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. If you're listening to us on iTunes, please subscribe to the channel. Give us a review. If you're listening on Podbean, give us a follow. Leave us some comments. We do appreciate the feedback. And that's one thing, if you guys notice, when you guys write me some feedback, I listen, I watch, and I try. I've been trying to get some questions to be asked. The only question I was asked was, can I give out a core 4? I might do a Periscope later on my personal Twitter at CK_013. I might do that later. The reason I can't give out a core 4 is because I'm heavily reliant on this injury news, especially on a site like today where we have a big list of questionables. So who might be in my core 4 now may not be later. So I don't want to give you guys any impression like, oh, I'm going to be playing this guy. And then everybody's like, oh, this guy's a great player according to this CK. Not that it really matters what I say, right? I'm just really here for entertainment and information. But anyway, so I can't really do that. But think of some questions. If you ask it to me the night before tonight, just shoot me some tweets asking some questions, and I'll try my best to answer it on Monday's podcast. And you have all weekend to think about it. So think about that for a second. So anyway, if you're not a member of WiseTake.com, please go to WiseTake.com. Membership is free. You get access to our free raw projections, our free raw cheat sheets, and of course our forums, which I'm trying to get going. I'm trying to make that a nice little community for DFS players to meet each other and discuss strategies. I think it's a great idea. I'm going to be working on getting a new website layout. I want to make it look a little more nice. So if the website goes under construction over the weekend, don't worry. I'll make sure that all the tools are still accessible. It's just going to be for a small period of time, it may be down. But anyway, that's pretty much it for me. I'll catch you guys on Monday. Have a great, happy, healthy weekend. And as always, good luck.